I am definitely very biased because I love Lee Mack and Chris McCausland is brilliant. So when I found out about Bad Tidings, I knew I had to watch this. I reactivated my Now TV subscription just to watch this. And on the one hand, I'm pleased to say I loved it because I love Lee Mack and Chris McCausland. But at the same time, I do have to try and judge it a little bit more objectively. Would I have liked this as much if the leading characters were played by, let's say, actors I'd never heard of? I will say the answer to that is no, I probably wouldn't have done. This was, of course, released this year in 2024. It's directed by Tim Kirkby and is written by Lawrence Rickard, Martha Howe-Douglas and Chris McCausland. And we have Lee Mack as Neil and Chris McCausland as Scott. And they are neighbours who don't exactly get along, but then they have to work together when they find themselves stuck in a very dangerous situation with some criminals, some burglars who decided to rob all of the houses at Christmas time, and Neil and Scott become involved in this and they have to work together to get out, otherwise who knows what will happen. Honestly, there are two reasons why this works. One, the comedy of Lee Mack and Chris McCausland independently are brilliant. Together, the other reason this works is because as a duo, they are just absolutely brilliant. I love them together. I thought it worked really well, and I really thoroughly enjoyed watching it for them. So if you're a Lee Mack fan, if you're a Chris McCausland fan, you will not be disappointed. With regards to the narrative itself, it's a little slow to begin with. The film is about an hour and a half, I think. I didn't note it down and it doesn't tell me the runtime on IMDb, but it was about an hour and a half. It wasn't tremendously long. And the pacing definitely was a little slow to begin with. Well, to begin with, it was okay, and then it slowed down a little bit, and then eventually the main action kicks in. So it's not consistent with the pacing, but I'd say from about the halfway mark, it's pretty quick, and we kind of never slow down too much, which I liked. There are times when it's maybe not the most exciting, but because McCausland and Mack are on screen for a lot of it, I absolutely adored most of it anyway because of that. But as I've said, I'm completely biased. Had they been played by actors I wasn't aware of, I didn't think anything of, then yeah, I feel like some of it might have been a little bit dull. So, well, I was going to say they got the casting right there, but with it written by, or in part by McCausland, I'm assuming it was always going to be McCausland, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was written with Lee Mack in mind. So they definitely make it a good film. That's not to say any other actors wouldn't have been good in the roles, but for me, they were definitely major, major pull factors. The narrative, it's good. It's a good story. It's well written. The pacing could be better, but I'm willing to admit that I probably would like it less were it not for Lee Mack and Chris McCausland. With regards to the technical aspects, camera work's great. We have they're really nice. I tried to find where this was filmed, and I genuinely can't work out this little housing estate. I can't work out if it's a real place or not. It looks so picturesque that it wouldn't surprise me if it was a set. And if it is a real place, I'd quite like to live there. The Christmas decorations, they look gorgeous when we see them, but part of the narrative is that the power goes out in the street, and that's why the burglars are going to take the opportunity to go into all of these empty houses. And because of that, it means a lot of the Christmas lights are obviously not on for a lot of the film. So when we see the decorations, they're beautiful. I will say the final third, maybe, is quite dimly lit just because of the situation that the characters find themselves in, and I feel like it's dimly lit for longer than I would have liked it to have been. It's not very pleasant to look at. But apart from that, I don't have any issues with any of the technical aspects. The performances are obviously really solid, and I would say it's funny, but not necessarily as funny as I would have liked. Definitely for me, the comedy comes from Lee Mack and Chris McCausland, in particular their interactions with each other. And that's not to say that, for example, when Neil was talking with his family, I didn't think the character was funny. It's just together, they work so well that it makes an okay film an actually great experience. So if you're a fan of Lee Mack, if you're a fan of Chris McCausland, absolutely check out Bad Tidings. If you don't like either of them, or if you're indifferent, maybe watch it, but don't expect the most thrilling experience. It's a good film. It's not a great film, but Lee Mack and Chris McCausland really elevate it to make it a much more enjoyable experience. So I'm too biased to say whether it's a really good film or not, because obviously my judgment is very much clouded by my love of Lee Mack and also of Chris McCausland. I'd love to know what anybody else thinks of it, particularly if you're indifferent. If you don't mind Lee Mack, if you don't mind Chris McCausland, how did you find it? Was it an enjoyable experience? Was it a bit of a flat narrative? I feel like the pacing was definitely an issue at times, but other than that, I don't think the actual execution of the narrative was too bad, and visually it's quite appealing for the most part, apart from a few scenes that are quite dimly lit. Also, just out of interest, I did Google where this was filmed. I should have done that before discussing this, to be fair. And yes, it was filmed partly at Elstree, but also on a housing estate in Stapleford Abbots in Essex. So that part of it was real, and that is absolutely gorgeous. It is. I like the layout. It looks rather appealing, and the film itself, it definitely is appealing. As soon as I heard about this, I knew I was going to pay to see it. I didn't care how much it cost. I absolutely needed to see it. And for information, I think it's on Sky. It's a Sky original, so it is on Sky, but also on Now TV. I don't have Sky, so I was very pleased to see it was on Now TV. Really recommend it, but take that with a pinch of salt because I'm biased. Would love to know what you think of it. Personally, I thought Bad Tidings was a really good experience, but I am willing to admit I'm biased. But nevertheless, I don't mind, because Lee Mack and Chris McCausland are brilliant, and Bad Tidings is pretty great too.